Hey guys, welcome back to Tennis 360, the podcast where we talk about all things tennis. My name is Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
And welcome to the 2024 tennis season. We've got a lot to talk about already. We've got United Cup, we've got Hong Kong, Brisbane, Nadal made a comeback. On the women's side, Naomi, Osaka made a comeback. Lots of comebacks, lots of stuff to get into already. It's been a really, really big week. Well, first of all, how are you adjusting to the new season of 2024?
Yeah, I feel like that was the shortest off season ever.
Yeah.
I know we haven't done a pod in a little over a month, but it feels like with all the exhibition tournaments and things going on, there was maybe 2 weeks of quiet. So I feel bad for the players, man. I would need more of a rest than that.
Yeah. There's a funny tweet on Twitter. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said 2023 off season, rest in peace 2023 off season, December 2023 to December 2023. It was less than a month's time. Next Gen Finals was like mid-December. It's like the funny thing is a lot of players were playing like exhibitions anyway, like pretty intense high level exhibitions. We had the Alcaraz Djokovic exhibition, Saudi Arabia. So that was kind of interesting, but anyway, definitely too short of an off season for my liking. I think it could be a bit longer, but it's something to get adjusted to now.
If your off season is that short, if you're looking at 2-3 weeks as an off season, it makes sense that you're going to play some competitive exhibitions in that period, because you can't really afford to take more than a couple of days off. In that, if you want to, come into the Australian Open at your top level, you can't spend those 2-3 weeks sitting on the couch. That's for sure. So really not much opportunity to get rest, even with the tour not having as many tournaments going on.
Yeah, that's true. I never really thought about it. You have to like really keep up that intensity for better or for worse, because like the thing about the off season that would be good is, well, number one, the obvious thing is rest. Number two is the fact that you could kind of improve different parts of your game and your physicality and just get better in lots of ways, improving just about every way possible. So that's not so good. But anyway, it is what it is. It was a crazy first week, though. We had first we can talk about United Cup. Team Germany got the win versus Poland. It was a really crazy final. It was one of the we've only had 2 United Cups, but I have a feeling this is probably going to stay one of the crazier ones that we've had, because Germany saves 2 championship points. Zverev, in the second to last match of the tie, saves 2 match points versus Hurkacz, one on his serve, the other with an amazing passing shot. Did you get to watch it? Did you think that was more Hurkacz or more Zverev that kind of put that tie over to Germany?
Yes, I stayed up late on Saturday night LA time to watch that tie. And Zverev, I think he got to bed at like 5 a.m. the night before or the day of that match. So he was really running on fumes. And I think what's impressed me about this performance from him was really kind of the grit, determination, like willingness to stick with it, kind of try some different strategies. I think in the first set, he came to the net a lot unsuccessfully, and in the second set was more willing to hang at the baseline. I think as much as Zverev was willing to, do the hard yards and kind of go the distance, I also thought Hurkacz really squandered some big opportunities. That match point on his serve, I felt like he didn't really go for it. He got his first serve in, but I don't think it was as big as first serve. I thought his approach shot was a little bit tentative, which kind of left the door open still. And I think the quality of his first serve kind of really dropped in the second and third set. And I think that's kind of what left the door open for Zverev to ultimately get the win. And I also thought there was some kind of negative body language coming from Hurkacz that just didn't help his ability to refocus and reset in the third set. And then once we got to the mixed doubles, I think he kind of continued that like negative defeatist energy a little bit. And the quality of the serving continued to kind of be a little bit below what I would expect from him. And I think he would probably be disappointed with that serving performance in general outside of that first set where it was looking good. And I think it was a nice advertisement for doubles, in particular mixed doubles. The fact that the tie did come down to a mixed doubles match tiebreak, that's pretty fun. And to see it being played by two top players from Poland's team, a world number one, a top 10 player, another top 10 player on Germany's team, and then a doubles specialist. And at the end of the day, the doubles specialist of Laura Siegemund from Germany, I think, was really the deciding factor in that tie. I thought she played really strategic, really smart doubles, and her movement at the end of the day, I think, is really what helped the team win against such a good hitter in Swiatek and such a good server in Hurkacz. I mean, you don't think of Siegemund as a great server, but in that match tiebreak, she won all of her serving points because she's so clever. She's so positionally aware. And so I thought that was a lot of fun, that's what it came down to. I think that, the fans who were there probably really enjoyed that it wasn't over after the second singles tie. And overall, a really just gritty performance from the Germans.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the tournament, for better or worse, kind of ended up being a little bit of more of a mixed doubles tournament because, I think 12 of the first 15 ties went to mixed doubles. Yeah. But like you said, I felt like it was a bit of a celebration of doubles. I like to see that nowadays. And also, the good thing about this event is it makes a lot of singles players play doubles, kind of like the Davis Cup. And that's a good thing to bring out a lot of kind of net play and prove that from players because we know that's lacking a lot nowadays with a lot of the baseline play. Hurkacz was visibly nervous, in my opinion, during the match, and like you said, his serve and confidence is kind of a cycle that kind of, I don't know, eats itself. Like if you're not serving well, you lose confidence. If you lose confidence, you're not serving well, and then it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. That's kind of what happened with Hurkacz. I think on the match point, he actually did miss his first serve by a bit, but then it was actually the match point on Zverev's serve that he came in, and then his backhand. Firstly, I felt like he had a backhand winner. He played very tentative, let Zverev back in, and then Zverev just completely missed the forehand. And I felt like Zverev, he fought well throughout the event. I mean, it's crazy to go to sleep at 5 a.m. and then win 2 doubles matches. We don't even usually see him as a doubles player. In fact, early in his career, it was his brother, Misha Zverev, who we saw as the volleyer. He was never a really good volleyer. But he's been volleying better even last season. That's some improvements that I saw. So 15-13, I think, in the tie. And it was an impressive display.
I think it's also worth noting that Team Germany got to the final not by winning their qualifying group. They were kind of like the lucky losers in the situation where they had the best runners-up performance out of their pool. And that's how they got into the quarters. It's the same story with Team USA, who ended up winning last year. So I thought that was an interesting kind of tidbit there as well, because really early on, I think if we had looked at the draw, at least I really thought Poland was the favorites to win the tie with Hurkacz and Swiatek. And they certainly were kind of blistering through everybody up until this final point.
Well, either Poland or Australia, right? Because they seemed like the two ones that had a really, really good doubles team, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Hurkacz, but I don't think Tomljanovic, no offense to her, was to me, their setup of Tomljanovic and Minaur was not as holy cow, that's a power team over Swiatek and Hurkacz.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the thing that I would say, those in Australia's doubles team were both absolute doubles specialists of Storm Hunter and Matthew Ebden, and they played, I think, nearly every tie. So that was the thing was, if this is a mixed doubles event, look for Australia because they basically have Brian and Brian on their team playing the mixed, even if they don't have the singles players. So I was they might be the ones to watch for, honestly. But Germany, Zverev, and maybe even just as impressive as the fashion beats them with Siegemund in the night before. So really impressive display from Team Germany, and I really think they were the underdogs. I don't think people came in expecting them to win. And to be honest, I'm happy that this event was as publicized and kind of talked about as it was, because I think it's probably my favorite version of the events that they've had to start out the season personally, because I really liked the Hopman Cup back in the day, but it probably makes more sense to have a WTA ATP event that actually counts for something, counts for points at the start, really gets a match play in for an event that costs already 500 points before the Australian Open, playing some of the best players in the world, which is really great. Even Djokovic played, which we can get to that as well. And kind of a big upset that happened with Novak. But I think it's a really good version of the event. I always wanted them to have an ATP WTA mixed event, to be honest. And I was happy that they did it. But I thought that once they did it, it might just be an ATP WTA sanctioned event like Laver Cup. I'm glad that actually for points and counts for something at the end of the day. So I was happy to see that. And I don't know.
Let's hope it stays. Like, that's the other thing, right? Because next year the schedule is looking different, and it sounds like they might try and squeeze in a Masters in Saudi in January before the AO. So some question marks. We're in the second edition into the United Cup, and already some question marks as to whether that will still exist in the same way that it has been over the last couple of years. Next year. So I really enjoyed it as well. And, it was over 70 matches across the last 10 days or so. That's a lot of tennis, a lot of opportunities for, folks to get match time. And I think it's also kind of a fun way for tennis fans to maybe follow, more closely some of their favorite players in a slightly different format, get behind their country a little bit, some different storylines than what we're used to seeing in a slam event. I thought the story of, I think it was Norway's female player, someone that was usually totally on the challenger side of the WTA and had one of the best matches against Garcia. That was super impressive, a lot of fun to watch. So I think United Cup also gives an opportunity to some of those players, first of all, from a money-making perspective and a point-making perspective, to kind of have a go and to see some new names and faces from smaller countries who we might not know. And that's always fun for tennis fans to see new storylines.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we had, Malene Helgo, who pushed both Caroline Garcia and Donna Vekic, both top 20, top 25 players for 3 sets.
Exactly.
Caroline Garcia was an absolute epic. She won the second set tiebreaker she shouldn't have won, and then third set tiebreaker. It was really good. I agree. It also shows some young players that might not be as high ranked at the moment. Like 19-year-old Sekularitis showed up when Tsitsipas couldn't play and pushed Jari to an epic, which everybody was like, who is this guy? But he's promising. So, I think it's good all around, and I'm excited for it to kind of stay for a bit. That's kind of my hope for it, and it was exciting. It was exciting to watch. There's a lot of great matches throughout the event. Tomljanovic versus Kerber was one of those, with two comeback players. In fact, we had a lot of players coming back this week on the ATP and the WTA side. Emma Raducanu, another young player, Amanda Anisimova. We had Naomi Osaka back, Nadal, obviously, Naomi Osaka, Cilic, and then also Angelique Kerber as well. So, and a couple other names to name as well. But those were some players who have come back this week. So that's been really good fun to watch. And it was a match between two comeback players. It was just an absolute epic match between Kerber and Tomljanovic, but it was a really strange match. And they broke. They had 15 breaks throughout the match from either player. And they weren't really serving bad, but neither player has the best serve, and they're both elite kind of returners and defenders. I have some stats. Like, Kerber was making 79% of first serves in, which is outrageous, to be honest. Tomljanovic was making 71% of first serves in. But they won 29 and 38% of their second serves throughout the match. And they were in the 50s in terms of first serve points won throughout the match. So their first serves just weren't there. It was a lot of breaks, break central. But it made it a lot of fun. The third set was just a marathon with some really outrageous rallies and defending from both. So it was really cool to see. Both players have good fighting spirit, and that should help them in their comebacks on the tour overall as well. But then the big one as well, which was Dimitrov upsetting Djokovic in straight sets, 6-4, 6-4. Djokovic had won 43 consecutive matches in Australia since 2018, starting from 2019. That's his second biggest consecutive streak in a country ever. His last one was in China, where he won 28 in a row, and then he lost to Federer, I believe, 6-4, 6-4 in Shanghai. That was 10 years ago in 2014. 43 matches in a row, and now he loses to Alex de Minaur 6-4, 6-4 in straight sets. He has lost a set in 9 of his last 14 matches, in 3 of his last 10, 2 against Sinner. last year. So a lot of players are being a bit more competitive with Djokovic, I feel like, at the moment, especially towards the end of last year, although it was coming off a long season, but still really good play. And Alex de Minaur playing the best tennis he's ever played. It was amazing. It was so different from the kind of dismantlement that Djokovic had against de Minaur at the Australian Open last year, where he won in straight sets. And de Minaur, in that match, de Minaur was just trying to play offense, like on the offense, and he had absolutely no shot of just doing that when Djokovic was playing as aggressive and ruthless as he was last year. But I felt like was different this year to me was that de Minaur was actually willing to defend more, and then his forehand, when he was able to get opportunities and step in, his forehand was hitting as big as ever. His defense was actually being really effective and getting a lot of good depth on it. And that really allowed him, when he was able to step in, turn defense to offense, his forehand was hitting really big. So it was really good all around from de Minaur. And that was a big match. What did you think of that upset?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, based on the type of player that de Minaur is, he's the type of guy that you don't want to face early on in the season. You know, he relies in terms of where his attributes are really on his fitness, which is going to be at its peak post, off-season period. And his body's going to be feeling good. I also think he plays, another level when it comes to representing Australia or playing in front of the Australian crowd. And, he had a really great season last year and showed promising signs of kind of being willing to add on top of this kind of, defensive game to find ways for him to be able to win the point. And I think he played and executed that perfectly against Djokovic. So full credit to him. I also think that, that there's a slight question mark over Djokovic's wrist, how that was doing. He presented a couple of times in this United Cup where he needed medical timeouts, and it looked like, it was impacting him, whether that was 2 or 3% or 10%, we don't really know, but he wasn't at 100% level Djokovic. And I also think with, someone his level of experience and his age, if he's feeling anything right now that, might be impacting his level ahead of the Australian Open, I think he does take a couple percentage points of his effort level off in order to, to protect his body. And I don't think that he's the type of person that's, going to take risks at a United Cup to try and pull something back. So I don't want to take anything away from Alex because it was an exceptional performance, but I do think one has to have in the back of their mind, kind of what was the conditions of Djokovic on the day, what's he got his mind and his eye on, and what's the priority for him. And I would guess that there's a couple percentage points there missing in terms of seeing the full level of Novak Djokovic in that match.
Yeah, that's true. I just don't want to take anything away from Alex de Minaur because even beating a Djokovic at 80 or 90% is a accomplishment in itself.
No, it's impressive. And he also had a good week. He beat Taylor Fritz as well. He moves into the top 10 for the first time in his career. There's nothing to say that, Alex didn't perform at, the highest level possible and that he brought his best tennis, and he totally deserved to win that match. I just think when we're talking about Novak Djokovic ahead of his, most successful slam, if he's got anything on his mind, I think as a player, one knows, how to protect things a little bit to make sure that he's not making anything worse for himself than it currently is. So I just always think it's worth thinking about it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, well, he also played a very impressive match against Zverev because, he had an impressive week. Quite a strange stat about de Minaur's week this week. He beat Zverev, Fritz, and Djokovic in straight set. He beat Fritz and Djokovic in straight sets. He lost to Zverev in 3. He beat Zverev in 3 sets. So 3 wins. His one loss was against Cameron Norrie, and Cameron Norrie's first win in about 6 months, which just shows you that tennis is an unpredictable sport. Because that is not something that I would expect against Cam Norrie. But against Zverev, he played a very impressive match. The key stat for me of the match was he won 24 out of 35 second serve points. He won 69% of first serve and second serve points. He was actually down a set and a break point at 2-2, and he played almost a miracle kind of volley backhand that hit right in front of the net. So that was an absolute key moment for Demon. I know that Australia didn't win the tie anyway, but for De Minaur to crack the top 10, because we don't know. We don't know how long he'll stay in the top 10. It was great to see that, and a fantastic win over Zverev, who only managed to break De Minaur once. De Minaur managed to break Zverev twice. So I thought that was an impressive kind of victory for the Australian, who's had been the top 15 about 3 years ago, but finally breaks the top 10. And it's one of these guys who are like, yeah, he deserves it. He always had the work ethic, he always had the skills, he always had the speed, the fight, but he's really added a lot more into his game and made it really effective against the top players. And pretty crazy to beat Nadal at United Cup last year and then Djokovic at United Cup this year, even though, as you mentioned, the circumstances are a little bit different. And we hope that Djokovic's wrist's okay going to Australia. Last year, he had some physical concerns as well coming into Australia, which we remember well. So you can't count out Novak. I think he's still the favorite, honestly, for the event. We've got to wait and see how he looks on the practice court, what his draw is like, but honestly, most important thing, how he's hitting that forehand, how his wrist is looking. So we'll see how that kind of keeps going. But also we had some other tournaments going on in Australia as well. We had Brisbane and Auckland. Brisbane was a WTA ATP combined event that I think is one of the craziest ATP WTA combined 250 events I've ever seen, because we had Rybakina and Sabalenka in the event, who ended up playing the final. We had Naomi Osaka in there. She came back. We had Rafa coming back, and then just some great players overall. Dimitrov, who has been playing at a top 10 level, playing against the top 10 Holger Rune. So this event was a bit of a crazy one for not just the 250, but the first week of the season. But Dimitrov got the win. He won his first title since 2017. I got to watch that final in full, staying up to about 4:30 in the morning here calling for the channel. And it was a great win. He's hitting the backhand so confidently. I think when Dimitrov is confident, he's one of the most annoying players to play on the tour. What did you think of kind of Grigor's win there?
Yeah, super high level performance, continues from a really strong post US Open, especially indoor season last year into the new year, which I think is kind of one of the hardest things to do, is keep that momentum going. And yeah, it seems like he's got a new love for it, a new energy for it, is playing some of his best tennis, looks mentally in a good spot. And if there's ever a time for Dimitrov to have a big year, whether that's a first Masters title or, really being a contender at a slam again, it's going to be now. And I think he's in a really good spot to just be positive and kind of see an upward trajectory from here. There's nothing to me that indicates his tennis isn't on the right level or isn't good enough. It certainly is. I mean, he defended beautifully, he moved fantastically, he served really well. His serve +1 combination with the forehand was extremely dangerous and would worry anybody. And yeah, I don't think anybody wants to see him on their half of the draw, their quarter of the draw coming into the Australian Open. He's in fine form.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And Australian Open has been his best major in terms of win percentage, and that was the closest he's ever gone to a major final. He's never been in the final of a major, but got to the semifinal. He played against Rafa in 5 sets. He got very close to winning that match as well. That was before Rafa would play Federer in that iconic final, but he got so close to the final there. So it'd be good to see him perform well. He's a dark horse for me. I think he'll be a dark horse for many people, because one of his problems, even last year, even in 2023, for the first half of last year, I think was the fact that he wasn't beating a lot of top guys, and mentally he was kind of struggling against the top guys. And the most obvious example was against Sasha Zverev at the Roland Garros for round of 16, where he was just hitting error after error, even though Zverev wasn't even testing him that much, but he was just completely mentally folded up in that match. And it was hard to watch. But last year, beat Tsitsipas in Paris, beat Medvedev in Paris, beat Alcaraz in Shanghai, got to the final of Paris. Now he won a title in Brisbane. He beat Rune in the final in straight sets. And it's the kind of performances that get you excited about a guy who might go all the way, not go all the way, but are at least contenders for having a big run at a major. And that's something that you want to look out for. And The backhand. It's the backhand. We knew the serve was there. The serve has only gotten better, but it's the backhand. It's the return of serve. Throughout that match, Dimitrov was in a lot of Rune service games. Almost every other game, he was getting to break point or at least the 30 all. I mean, he was pushing Rune throughout that first set. In fact, by the time the 2-set match ended, it was about 2.5 hours long. The very long straight sets match, but he was tested. It was so many long games, including 9-deuce game in the second set on the Rune serve. And in the first service game that Rune had, he went up low 40 on the Rune serve. So the return of serve is amazing. He's hitting through his shots. The backhand is confident. And it's the kind of stuff that you want to see from a guy. It's been a while since we've seen a one-handed player outside of Tsitsipas do well out of major. This is a guy that might be able to do that. And he's hitting that one-hander really, really well. It's really exciting. Rune also had a good tournament. He got to his first outdoor hardcourt final, which is a good result for him. But then also the biggest news, in my opinion, of the tennis world in this first week is the return of Rafael Nadal, who is back in his first event. And by the crazy powers of the tennis gods above, it is Dominic Thiem who he gets in his first round match, who qualifies into the event. And you're just like, wow, that's crazy. And it was technically a 1 in 6 chance, but still, the fact that we got it is just like, okay, well, there you go. So Rafa won 2 matches. He beat Thiem, he beat Jason Kubler. These are players that are outside of the top 90 in the world at the moment, but still good wins. And the fact that Rafa was looking with the intensity that he had, the aggression that he had, hitting the serve very well, the backhand was firing too. Really good signs. And we can get to the third match in a second, but what do you think of kind of Rafa's kind of victories back on the tour, or how he looked kind of in his first match against Thiem as well?
Yeah, I mean, I remember right at the turn of the year, Rune had a practice with Nadal and kind of sat in a press conference and was like, that was one of the hardest practices ever. The guy is back. And, you know, Nadal is such a perfectionist. I am not surprised that he returns at a level that it wows people, impresses people. He obviously was going to do everything he could in that year off and time a comeback with a high level or high performance that he felt he could trust. And I think it was, you know, so from that perspective, I was not surprised per se. I didn't think that Nadal would want to have a sort of like comeback tour where his level is like shockingly low in comparison to what we're seeing from him in the past. So I kind of had that expectation going in that he was going to play well, and he did. And you know, then one only has kind of questions to ask over. All right, so he's physically hanging in there. He can play, but what's his match fitness like? You know, what does he? How is he playing the big points? You know, does he look mentally as sharp as he has been, you know, after not playing matches for a year, which I think for tennis players is always the biggest question when you're looking at people making comebacks. It's never really like, you know, does this person still have the ability? Of course, with major injuries, there's question marks, but the ability is going to be there. It's a matter of, is that mental toughness there that, you know, playing matches day in, day out, week in, week out for a season puts you in a different, you know, level of preparation than if you haven't played competitive matches in a year. So I think that's maybe where we saw some of those, not weaknesses, but just areas of opportunity to improve on as he continues his comeback. And then unfortunately, in that match against, who was it? Jordan Thompson, he had match points on his racket and couldn't get it done. And then sadly, looked like he kind of picked up a little bit of a muscle tear, micro muscle tear that has cut his chances of participating in the Australian Open. But I think for Nadal fans, obviously disappointed not to see him in the first slam. But I will be honest, I didn't think he was going to play the Australian Open this year. I don't think that being able to come back and play best of 5 after having maybe 1 or 2 best of 3 tournaments prior was ever really going to be a smart move for him. And I think he's not confirmed if this is really his last year, but most likely. And I think for him, the priority is going to be Roland Garros and the Olympics. And I thought if there was even any percentage of question marks or doubt over his ability to play best of five, that he wasn't, going to risk it. And it's the smart move. And he has the micro tear in his muscle. It's going to take a couple weeks. And hopefully he'll make strategic decisions with his calendar to put himself in an optimal position for the next slam.
Yeah, I think it's the thing with older players kind of having comebacks, right? Is that, well, like you said, it's kind of the lack of match play and the big points, which I think you said, which I think is interesting. I think the other thing, though, is that when you're up match point and you're 37 years old and you're not sure if the body is going to hold up for that much longer, for the set after, or for 2 or 3 more sets, however long it may be, you're like, I've got to finish this right now. I don't have time to play around. Like, I don't know if my body is going to even hold up. In the case of Rafa, it really didn't hold up. He got a micro tear in the third set, which is very unfortunate. So I don't know. It's funny how you play a tennis match. You hope you get to match point. You want to do as well as possible. But I'm almost wondering, does Rafa regret having match points? Because that is such a heartbreak for Rafa. But at the end of the day, it's a good learning experience, I think, for the rest of the season. Like you said, he's going to want to compete for the clay. I've seen some people say that he's going to go straight to the clay courts, which I kind of very much doubt, to be honest. I think he would want the best match play even going into the clay swing, to be honest, especially since at the very start of the clay swing, Monte Carlo has been such a successful event for him. It's not like Djokovic, where Monte Carlo has been his least successful Masters event. Like, Monte Carlo, I think, is Rafa's most successful, or at least most successful with what would it be? Rome, I believe. One of his most successful events, and one that he won 8 consecutive titles there from up until 2013. So I think that Rafa is going to want the best possible match play, and like you said, it's a farewell tour. I think his priority is clay, but I don't think it's not a priority to have as many farewell waves to the crowds at all the events that he had throughout his special career at different matches. I think that's a priority for him, who really adores tennis and has really enjoyed a career that was filled with a lot of struggle, but also with a lot of joyous moments and success at a lot of the different tournaments. So that is something that I would say. My prediction is not that he's going to come back on clay. I think he's going to come back on hard courts. But the other thing I will say is that he was playing really, 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 really good hardcourt tennis for his first 2 matches. Like, he didn't have a choice about who his first 2 opponents were. Obviously, the 3 hour and 25-minute third round match where Thompson really played a very high level, really kind of got the best of Rafa. But I think that in his first 2 matches, he probably would have beaten a lot of top 60, top 70, top 50 guys, in my opinion. Obviously, he wants to climb his level higher. So. But I think he was playing at a really good level, and not many people can beat Jason Kubler 6'2", 6'1", beat any top 100 guy 6'2", 6'1". So he was playing strong. His forehand, I also wasn't shocked that he was at a good level. I was more shocked about the intensity that he came out with, like, within just the very first point on the court after a year of not playing matches. But the forehand was never an issue to me. It was also... I wasn't that surprised by his movement. He is one of the best athletes in the world. I thought he would get it back. That was definitely something to watch. For me, it's the fitness over the whole season, right? That's the thing that I kind of want to – that's something that I want to kind of look for more than anything else. That's what is my biggest watch. And so far, third match back, already injured. It's far from ideal, but I hope that he is able to play a lot of the more big events coming down the road. And it seems like Roland Garros is going to be his first tournament back. He would have liked to play Australian Open, but it's going to be exciting if he is able to play Roland Garros, which we all hope that he's able to. But
I think the one thing with Rafa that's been kind of consistent throughout his career is, like, the guy is always going to give 110%, and it doesn't surprise me that he came flying out of the blocks, like, first point, first match. Like, he's excited to be out there. He's excited to be competing, and I think, in a way, like, it's always been his competitiveness, his just outright desire to win, grind, like, never give up, never say die type of attitude that is a reason why so many people and fans love him, but has also been, maybe a contributing factor to why his career won't have the longevity of somebody like Novak, who, you know, has the same mentality. But in terms of Nadal's game, like his body was always going to be what defeats him at the end of the day with how he plays, his style. You know, and we talked about it even last year in the Australian Open. It's like, why did you finish that match? Like, why did you play that extra set? You know, how much worse did you make that injury? And we saw it at Wimbledon a few years before that, where it seems like sometimes some decisions he makes, unfortunately, you know, put him in a situation where his body can't hold up. And a part of me just wondered, like, he really came out playing full pelt, which obviously he needed to do if he had, you know, real true intentions of playing in Australia. He really needed to go out there and test it, especially in best of three. But I was a little like concerned, given the aggressiveness of his movement and kind of how he was playing. I was like, geez, like he's all out. And I just sort of wondered, like, is there a way for him to play and kind of make a comeback that maybe feels a little more gradual, where you've still got something in the tank a little bit? I don't know, you know, maybe that's not right, or not the right mentality. It certainly doesn't suit him, but I think that's kind of been a thread for him throughout his career, where that unfortunately his body has let him down because of the intensity and the nature in the way that he plays.
Yeah, well, it's a very hard question to answer, and the thing is that there's a very good argument against the fact that he went around about his career in the wrong way, just because he did end up having the most Grand Slam titles of anybody ever, by 2 ahead of anybody ever at one point in his career, as the second most majors ever. So he obviously had a lot of success throughout his career. It might be just a thing of everybody kind of goes through their own journey and has their own way that they need to kind of go about things. But I will say you do bring up an interesting point, in that you look at a guy like Carlos Alcaraz, and I hate people just compare Nadal and Alcaraz just ad nauseum, just because they're both Spanish, although you can make some comparisons. But this comparison kind of comes up by itself, which is that they are both players that can struggle at the last part of the season. And I'm not sure that it's entirely because the last part of the season is indoors, but it's because they both give 120% for most of the season, and then they can just run out of gas. And they will go every point just going 110%. I think Rafa throughout his career has been a little bit better than Alcaraz so far at finding the right times in a match to peak. So far, Alcaraz is literally just like every point is like is like match point, like he's down.
It's a grueling way to play tennis, and it's the major reason why Nadal has had success. It's the major reason why we love him. I mean, it's certainly an attribute I wouldn't want to take away from him. It's just sort of, you know, when one thinks about longevity in careers and things like that, it's always something that people have kind of brought up about Nadal, is like, maybe sometimes you need to pick your moments a little better, or you make some strategic decisions in terms of, okay, you know, I know you've never pulled out of a match because of an injury, or it's happened so few times. Maybe now that you're over 35 years old, give yourself a break and default, or, you know, retire in a match every once in a while if your body needs to. It's things like that where I think, you know, he's the ultimate competitor, the ultimate sportsman, and has always played, you know, giving his 100%. That's why he gets so much respect. I just think at moments in the later halves of his career, I felt like maybe he could have been more selfish. And I think it's just the unfortunate way also of how the Australian Open is placed in the calendar, where he really timed his comeback with such a short lead-in, where, you know, he wouldn't really have had time. Maybe he would have liked to play, like, I don't know, a 250 with less of an intense entry list, and you know, maybe had a couple more of those with some time spaced out in between ahead of, you know, going into a slam. But him knowing that he only had a few weeks to kind of get ready for it, he was obviously going to go all in from the first match. And it's just unfortunate to see him pick up an injury, but let's see, you know, how he chooses to deal with it, how he recovers from it, and kind of what his scheduling decisions are.
Yeah, because I was gonna say it's been unfortunate, but I don't want to be fully negative about it either, because like it could have been a lot worse. He said because it's not like he injured a part of his injured his arm, or like injured a part of like his knee, which would be terrible as well. But he injured the same part of the body that got him out of the tour for a year last year. So it's or near that part, but it wasn't the exact same part, which is kind of what was ultimately really relieving at the end of the day. That was kind of what was not what got him. Was not what the injury was, because he said himself that he was worried that it might be the same part of his body. And overall, like you said, it's the very start of the season, so he'll have a lot of time to come back. And he said overall he won 2 matches. He played a pretty good third match, even though he really should have put away both of his first 2 match points. He had an easy sitting forehand that in over 20 years of his career, I've never seen him miss that single shot, which is just an easy sitting forehand, just missed down the line. And then also there's an easy backhand volley that he missed. Third match point, Thompson actually played very well. It was a big body serve from Rafa, and then Thompson played a fantastic point to turn defense into offense. But his first 2 match points, Rafa definitely should have won. It was 3 hours and 25 minutes. It was an epic match. Rafa, I think, will feel like it was an overall positive experience. Only unfortunate part, he's not going to be able to play in Melbourne. He got to play in Brisbane, but he's not going to be able to play Melbourne, play the Australian Open. Hopefully he is healthy enough to play Sunshine Double, or at least the clay swing, and that we get to see him back in action as kind of soon as possible. The other thing kind of going on, we're also going to do a bit of an Australian Open preview a little bit later, just some quick touches upon a couple of the other tournaments going on this week. Brisbane was kind of the big one. On the men's side,
let's talk a second about in Brisbane, the Rybakina Sabalenka match or final, because that was honestly, I really thought I saw flawless tennis from both of these women for the whole week. I mean, it was really impressive level, and I think so. The final score between Rybakina and Sabalenka was 6-love, 6-3. I mean, it was a complete demolition job, and I think with Rybakina, in a way, almost from the French Open onwards last year, where she got sick and had to pull out, we've just not seen the highest level from her. She's been dealing with illness, dealing with injuries. She said she got sick again in her off season. So she's kind of been through the ringer, but she's certainly reminded us just how good she is when she is fully fit. And I think what's scary is like how easy she made it look. I mean, we know she's a great server, but that motion is just so clean, so fluid, so reliable. Just huge power from the baseline, like seems to be making really good decisions on the court in terms of her strategy. And, you know, sometimes we see these types of score lines when you've got like 2 big power players like this playing against each other. And sometimes it's one-way traffic and there's nothing that you can do. Because Sabalenka really did impress me all week, both with her attitude and her playing. I mean, she hit an impressive number of winners. The unforced error count was low enough. She was serving well. And I think she also will have been a little bit shocked or a little bit surprised to see that level from Rybakina this early on in the season. But yeah, I think you know, she reminds us why she won Wimbledon and why she's been in the top 5 the last couple of months, and why she's certainly a contender. I mean, she got to the final at the AO last year, and I think she has certainly put her name on the ticket as being the person to watch her to contend with in terms of getting to the final this year as well.
Yeah, it was 6-0, 2-0. She led in that match, which is like 8 games for Rybakina and none for Sabalenka. It was just absolutely one-sided. And yeah, like you said, Sabalenka won a bunch of breadsticks and bagels throughout the tournament. It wasn't like she wasn't coming through the tournament easy. Yeah, Rybakina at her best, just her footwork is so like kind of elegant and easy. Sabalenka is kind of the fearless kind of play. She'll go for a big second serve. She'll just ruthlessly be going after forehand and backhand, but she's not going for the lines. Like she's just picking a spot on the court and kind of just going for it. Rybakina, it looks so easy and so elegant. She just hits line to lines. It almost like it literally looks like perfection on a tennis court. You could argue like at the net, like the net game could be better, but even in that match, she had some great volleys coming to the net. Like everything was kind of working for her. And I think she's a contender for like the highest peak in the women's game, because when she's playing like that, I don't know if anybody can touch her. And And that includes Iga as well. I'll just go out and say, because she has a winning head-to-head against Iga. When Rybakina is playing her best, just in terms of peak level, I really don't know that there's anybody that consistently stands up to that in terms of their peak game.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, when you look at like the type of game that beats Swiatek, you know, think Ostapenko. It's the type of person that's going to play all-out big power tennis, and I think with Rybakina, she's the one who's able to do that throughout a match, like most consistently. Like with Sabalenka, we'll see some highs and lows, some momentum switches in a match. Maybe, you know, some moments where you kind of might be like, oh, that's an odd service game here or there. Right. I will say Sabalenka's backhand really impressed me this week. I mean, it was just huge. But yeah, as you say, I think it's the cleanness of the Rybakina game. It's hard to find fault in her technique at all. Her movement is so good, her anticipation, and I think really from a strategic perspective, the way that she's playing the points is what's so impressive to me. And yeah, I mean, she certainly looks like she's back to her highest level, which is just fantastic in terms of setting up the women's game with 4 big names who have won slams in the last 18 months or so, 2 years, really. You know, between the 4 of Swiatek, Sabalenka, Rybakina, and Gauff, who also won a title this week, it's going to be a great tournament.
Yeah, it sets up for an interesting women's event, and I guess almost by definition it does, or I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but almost you don't even have to think about it very much in terms of Iga was by far the player coming in with the most momentum out of 2023, winning the WTA finals, but she had never won. She had never even reached the final of the Australian Open before. So you look at a player like Swiatek and you're like, oh, well, she might win the Australian Open, but let's see if she can do better than she has in the rounds before, which by definition is pretty compelling in itself. So, so I would say that. And also, she didn't reach the final last year with Sabalenka and Rybakina, who played fantastic events this week. Then you have Coco, who won in Auckland, which we'll get to in a second. But but you have Coco in Auckland, who just won the U.S. Open, the very last major played. So I agree. Exactly. It's going to be great. Yeah, one thing I would say about Rybakina is that after Rome, after she kind of withdrew out of Roland Garros, she kind of her level dropped for the last 7 months.
Yeah.
But for the last 5 months, for the first 5 months of 2023, her level was extraordinary, and people thought that she was a big contender for the world #1 ranking, even because the way she was playing. Because she had got it done on Wimbledon grass courts the year prior. She got it done on the slow Rome clay. She was extremely consistent on hard courts, and a lot of the last kind of part of the season was hard courts. And then she kind of slowed down, but she's very new to the top of the tour. She only reached the top 10 at the start of last year. I think her game really fits well in Australia. She was actually my pick for the Australian Open. And we can look at our power rankings for Australian Open in a second as well. But she was kind of my pick for the Australian Open before the year started. And she had a great week. But I just think the conditions suit her well. She's going to come in with less pressure than Sabalenka or Swiatek, in my opinion. And Sabalenka is going to have a lot of pressure on her. But yeah, it's just really good to see Rybakina. And one last thing I'd say about Rybakina, she's just like, I think you made a good point. When she's zoned in and has a really good performance, she doesn't let her foot off the gas. Like when she has her peak performance, she's just zoned in. She's a quiet killer, and she will. It doesn't matter who's on the other side of the net. She is as determined as it gets, and she just puts her head down and just strategically, technically, just plays pretty much flawless. So she's a great addition to the tour. She belongs in that big 3 moniker, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah, well said.
And then going on to Auckland and the Auckland WTA event, also the Hong Kong ATP event. Before we'll talk about the Australian Open in a bit as well. In Auckland, it was Gauff beating Svitolina in the final 6-7, 6-3, 6-3. The fourth woman to win back-to-back titles in Auckland. It is her 7th title. She only dropped 1 set to Svitolina in the final. Both of these players are such good players in finals that this was so compelling to watch, because you go in and you know that Alina Svitolina is 17-3 in finals, which is currently one of the most ridiculous finals records on the WTA tour, which is part of the reason Svitolina has been able to climb up the ranks so much. Even if she hasn't won a major, she's won a lot of other titles. And Coco, who's also, I believe, now 7-1, 8-1 in finals. Anyway, really, really good. What'd you think of that match?
Really enjoyed it. A great matchup. You know, I think Svitolina continues to impress. I think we expect a high level from her now. I mean, she was a former number 3 in the world, and she's playing top 10 level, in my opinion. I love how her game has evolved and changed since she's come back as a mother, playing much more aggressive tennis. I mean, I saw a couple stats, a ridiculous number of winners to unforced error ratios in the prior rounds. You know, is finding a way to win matches when she's feeling leggy, when she's feeling sore. That semifinal, she was dealing with, you know, a bad back in the first set, and still kind of, you know, found a way to keep it competitive and figure out a different game plan to help her win. And she's just adjusting really well. And, you know, Coco, I think it was either going to be a shift of, okay, I've won the US Open. Now I feel a lot of pressure and oh my God. And kind of maybe potentially seeing a dip in form before we see her back. Or it was going to be, I am a US Open champion. I'm a Grand Slam champion. I'm great on hard courts. I'm a great athlete, and I fully invest and believe in myself. Now I'm going to take this, you know, full confidence, full stride. And I think she is the latter of the two in terms of what happens when you win a Grand Slam title at that age. And I fully expect her to have a really strong season. Whether that includes another slam or not, I don't know. But I think she is just such a good athlete and is, you know, made some adjustments and improvements that she needed to make in order to win the slam. I think Brad Gilbert is just a fantastic coach for her and is really going to be key to kind of unlocking these consistent performances and results in finals. And it was, you know, it was a competitive match. I mean, you know, tiebreak, lost that first set tiebreak when she was in positions early on in that set to go ahead and take it. And I mean, she's so composed mentally too, you know, sort of like didn't freak out, went back to the drawing board, went back to work and got the job done. And, you know, extremely professional performance from somebody her age, and is not playing like somebody who, you know, has a lot of pressure on their shoulders. And I honestly, you know, feel really good about her upcoming season.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think pressure is going to be a big problem for Coco, because I feel like she's dealt with this kind of pressure on her since she came to the tour and was around 15 years old, just beat Venus. Yeah. And some people place this kind of next Serena or next Venus moniker on her. And is this next kind of great, like, American star to kind of take up the mantle on the WTA side. And I think she's used to the pressure. And I think that I agree that Brad Gilbert is fantastic. He understands tennis in a very deep way, especially from a coaching standpoint. He's coached a lot of players in a very impressive way. I put him with a guy like Paul Anico and Darren Cahill, just players who are really, really solid coaches that have had a lot of success on the coaching side. And I think it was never about the mentality or about the physicality. I think now that she's had those two in the bags pretty much since she came on tour, but now she needed the technicality aspect, especially on the forehand, and that forehand is sitting a lot bigger. I agree with everything you said about the final, and I'm glad to see Coco having success right away, because that definitely wasn't a must at all. But you did mention, just real quick before we kind of move on, you did mention kind of really good winners to unforced errors ratio. And before we move on completely from Brisbane, I want to mention Naomi Osaka came back, which I don't think we touched upon. And I don't know if you saw, but Osaka hit 40 winners and 12 unforced errors against Pliskova, and she still lost that match.
That was an absurd match. Every once in a while, Pliskova comes out from whatever hole she's in and reminds us that she was a former world number 1. I mean, that woman can play crazy tennis, and it's annoying because it's like, why'd you choose this match to show up? Yeah. But that was great. Again, like another great representation of women's tennis. And Naomi Osaka put on, you know, two really fantastic performances in her comeback matches. I mean, I don't think she should be disappointed with that loss to Pliskova, because Pliskova just played out of her mind. I mean, she served incredibly well, and there wasn't really much Osaka could have done. But she certainly, to me, looks like she is going to be a headache for anybody that has her on her side of the draw. I mean, her natural talent, her hand skills, her serve. If she wants to be up there and be a contender, it's really on her terms, in my opinion. because she can do wwhatever she wants.
That's very fair. And she's very streaky as well. Every time she's reached a major quarterfinal, she's gone all the way at that major now. She's 4-0 in majors where she's reached a quarterfinal. Absolutely absurd match. The ball striking, I mean, Osaka is one of the better ball strikers on the tour. Just a couple stats as we're on that match. Pliskova's first serve, Osaka only won 10 points of 68. On Osaka's serve, Pliskova won 12 of 64, which is just outrageous.
Great numbers.
Yeah. At one point in the match, I just remember the stat as it came on TV as I was watching. It was 88% first serve points won for Osaka, 82 for Pliskova, which is just numbers you never see in your life.
Dream.
Yeah, 47 winners to Pliskova, 24 unforced errors. The stats are just ridiculous. And then also Pliskova had a great match against Ostapenko in the next round as well. And then Ostapenko had a great match against Azarenka. There's a lot of really high-level matches in that event.
And Ostapenko was a quarterfinalist at the Australian Open last year, and she had a good run at the US Open last year. I mean, I think, Ostapenko, some tennis fans might not remember her winning a Grand Slam at Roland Garros back in, was it like 2016, I want to say, somewhere around there, 2017. And she was very young when she won it, and she's obviously had up and down years and up and down performances, but again, she's another one of those players, like, when she's on, you don't want her in your half of the draw, especially on hard courts. And she's somehow, over the last year or so, been finding ways to be more consistent in back-to-back matches. And we've been talking about her as not, a favorite per se, but as somebody who's in that, outside group of contenders who watch out for, and at least as someone who's capable of taking out a top seed at a tournament if she doesn't even go on to win it, but she's certainly capable of taking somebody big out of a tournament.
Yeah, I would be downright shocked if we don't see a big upset from Ostapenko. It's just the thing of, even when she won that Roland Garros 2017, I think she only won one title throughout the whole year season. So I don't know if she's going to be able to rise up her ranking to, say, the top 5, especially with the depth and kind of the talent and the great mentalities on the women's side at the moment. But what I will say is, I wouldn't be that shocked if she has another Roland Garros 2017 moment in the next few years, or at least gets to a final or a semifinal, has a big run, because she is a player who, when she's streaky, we were just talking about peak level. She has a high peak level, and it's the kind of drama and unpredictability that I tend to really enjoy in sports.
I love watching her.
I love watching Penko. I'm not gonna lie.
She can beat anybody on her day. So
triple bounce.
Yeah, she's funny. She's fun to watch. But let's wrap up this. This what happened so far with Hong Kong. Rublev gets his 15th career title against Rustavori, and to be honest with you, I was thinking about it yesterday. 15 titles is quite a lot in terms of active players at the moment. That is big. And we talked about him a lot towards the end of last season in terms of the game has gotten so much better. He's improved on so many things in 2023. And it's just always been a question mark of, can you then beat the top guys when you're getting towards the end of a tournament? And this is a Hong Kong 250. I don't think that this is indicative of any changes on that front. But it certainly puts him in a positive mindset, I hope, going into the Australian Open. And, this is going to be a year where we start to see, can he adjust in any way to make himself competitive once he's getting into, the round of 16 and beyond in these majors. And that's where we're going to have to start seeing him, insert himself into the conversation or not. And, he's a fan favorite. He's somebody that I would say most people enjoy watching and enjoy being a part of these tournaments. So I'm glad he got a first season win, and I'm impressed by his title haul. It's a sizable one.
15 career title. It's the I saw since the pandemic. It's the he's tied for the second most on tour with, I believe, with Medvedev for the most titles won since 2020 with 15, only behind Djokovic. So. Yeah, quite a lot. 15 is crazy. He's won a title every single year since 2017. So there you go. And he's a fan favorite, very genuine guy. Could see him having success. I'm very curious by what his 2024 looks like, to be honest. And then also in the tournament, another comeback player, Marin Cilic, came back, but he's going to want to forget about it quickly because he was up 9 match points miraculously against Jan-Lennard Struff, and he couldn't quite close it, which is going to be an absolute heartbreaker of a comeback. And it was just a cruel thing that in a day of comebacks, in a week of comebacks, you have Marin Cilic who tried to come back and was up 9 match points against a guy as solid as Jan-Lennard Struff, and he just couldn't quite close it with endless chances in that match. So it was just kind of a cruel moment there of a comeback.
Match fitness, again, like how are you playing matches week in, week out? Are you finishing them? It's for some reason, the psychology of tennis, you get most nervous when you have match points. I don't know what happens. This game is brutal, but it's also worth, noting that Struff had some injury challenges of his own towards the end of last year, and also didn't have a lot of momentum or, kind of match practice coming into this tournament. And so I hope he takes some positive and some confidence from this, because he was really a great addition in the 2023 season and created a lot of really fun storylines for people. And he's a fantastic, contributor in the top 50 realm of tennis. And so, good to see him kind of being able to hang in there. But yes, Cilic will be having some nightmares about this one.
Yeah. And Cilic, Struff is one of the most mentally solid, kind of just, he doesn't care who he's playing, like players on the tour. And he didn't even get a chance to play on grass or at Wimbledon last year that much, but he got to the final Madrid on clay court. So good to have Struff back, good to have Cilic back as well. But I hope that doesn't happen next week for Cilic's sake. But then, let's move on then to our kind of Australian Open power rankings and the Australian Open segment as a whole for the event.
Yeah, so, obviously just reminding us our defending champions are Djokovic and Sabalenka. And so we've talked a lot about, who's in form in these kind of warm-up tournaments. We're going to discuss who's pulled out, wildcards, notable unseeded names, qualifiers, other information, and then go into our power rankings. We'll kind of discuss, who really are our top contenders on both the WTA and ATP side. So it's worth kind of noting, obviously we chatted about Nadal pulling out. We've got some other names on the ATP side, and Liam Brody, Nick Kyrgios, the bigger name.
Nick just can't play. It's just
can't get back. Yeah, it's he'll be disappointed with that for sure. And then Opelka still not healthy. And on the WTA side, former finalist Jennifer Brady is out. Madison Keys is out. Mukova, who had a great season last year. Big shame that she is not participating. Kvitova, who's pregnant, so we're not going to see her for the rest of the season. And Andreescu, still not well with a back injury that she picked up towards the later half of last year. Venus Williams, Lauren Davis, Begu, McNally, and Potapova are all out. So that's left some opportunities for some notable names to sneak their way back in, including Rybakina. A lot of people thought she was going to have to play qualifying. I mean, she was in a situation where she would have had to, had these players not pulled out. But I think it was thanks to Lauren Davis pulling out that Rybakina got into the tournament. And talking about comebacks briefly, Rybakina played a good level this week. And, for those who didn't know, she had wrist surgery on both wrists, I think ankle surgery on both ankles last year. And, it was always going to be question marks with her as to what her level was going to be. But I think she showed glimpses of that, especially in her match against Svitolina. And, I don't think she's a contender or a name that's going to make it deep. But I'm hoping that 2024 is an opportunity for her to reinsert herself at least into the top 50 in the women's conversation. And if she can pick up a title here or there, because I do think she has the game to be competitive on the WTA side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she has a lot of upside when she's playing well. And anybody who can win 10 matches at a Grand Slam tournament when they're 18 years old is something not to just underestimate, because I know she didn't play a top 10 name at that tournament, which does probably take points away, but she played Zachary, she played Belinda Bencic, who had just won the Olympics. So I still say it's
impressive. It doesn't matter. She beat her opponent and she won that tournament fair and square. And I think you made a good comparison earlier, like with Coco Gauff, she wins a slam at, as a teenager, but I think she was on the tour for a lot longer. She's, seen the ebbs and flows of a WTA season. She's had, an unrealistic pressure put on her from 15 years old. Whereas I think with Raducanu, the year she won the US Open, she just kind of had a breakout at Wimbledon, like had a good run. Like it was really like, oh, who is this girl? And like, where has she come from? And then all of a sudden, unexpectedly having to deal with all of that pressure, having like just finished school, like just turned pro, like all of this stuff happening. She wasn't conditioned to be on a, consistent pro level in the way that Coco Gauff has been. So I think it's understandable to see different trajectories in this way, where, you kind of have these breakout moments where somebody clearly has the ability to play at such a high level, which she does. But I don't think she had the structure, the training, the experience to be able to maintain that realistically. That was always an unfair pressure to put on her. And, I'm hoping, I think she said to herself now, it's, been 2 years since she's won the US Open. She kind of had pretty much most of last year out. And so it's an opportunity for her to start over. And I really hope she takes advantage of that.
Yeah, it's the physicality as well of like the body adapting as well, because young players struggle with physicality all the time. She had so many retirements, so hopefully she gets her body right, and that she can play a lot, because she is a good addition to the tour. Yeah,
and wildcards, we've got I think it's about 65% of wildcards at the Australian Open are awarded to local and homegrown talent. That's not unusual. It's the same for the other slams as well. On the WTA side, it's going to be fun to see the return of Daria Saville. She's a great contender, a great personality on the WTA side, and obviously an Australian favorite. So excited to see her back. Caroline Wozniacki gets another wild card. She obviously made her return at the US Open last year, but excited to see her play. She's always a great addition.
We need her back. I want Wozniacki back. I want to see her having good. She had a good run at the US Open. I want to see her do well.
And we've got Elise Cornet, who, for those of you who don't know, this is her 66th consecutive Grand Slam, which I think is one of the most absurd stats I have ever heard in tennis. I mean, how is your body okay? Like, what the hell?
And she started when I think she was like 18, like she's only like what, 33, 34? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like she's making the end of these Grand Slams, so it's a little different from talking about someone who's winning them. But 66, when you think about how many years that is to be healthy to play a Grand Slam, it's a really ridiculous, really impressive statistic. And I think it's testament to her as a player in terms of just being so resilient and being such a good ambassador for the sport, loving getting out there and competing. And she had a good little run here, I think last year or 2 years ago, kind of had a nice little fairy tale moments in Australia. So it's nice to see her get the opportunity on the back end of her career. I think she seems to kind of be like she's on her way out.
She did say she's going to have a farewell season. So we'll see if that kind of comes to fruition. But it's good to see her playing.
Yep. And lastly, Kerber as well is back in the mix. Although she's not in a wild card, that's incorrect. She's coming back in on a protected ranking. And then on the ATP side,
on the ATP side, Chinese teenager Shang, who looks really impressive. Him. Yeah, he looks really good. Yeah, his forehand is really, really good. I got a chance to see him in Atlanta play, and he just looks fantastic. And he's fun. He's fun. Yeah, I like him as well. And then also a really talented French teenager, Arthur Cazal, just a few teenagers getting some wild cards who I think are going to get more in the zeitgeist in terms of people knowing their names pretty soon. But yeah, those are a couple of notable wild cards. Everybody else is Australian. There are some good names there, but those were some of the more notable ones from WTA and ATP sides. And then notable unseeded names as well. You have, we mentioned Raducanu, you have Osaka, Kerber, Tomljanovic, you have Sofia Kenin, you have Pliskova. Sofia Kenin is a player that I have some high hopes for this year. I'm hoping that Kenin can do something, but it's the kind of thing of she's losing to players that she really shouldn't be losing to, and then she's kind of beating players she shouldn't be beating. But I'm glad that she is. She's having some good upsets, but it's a bit of inconsistency still. So we'll see if she gets back there. She did reach was Australian Open champion 2020. That's
exactly. I mean, she's won this tournament. It's again kind of been another one of those WTA names that's won a slam over the last 5 years. It's like completely gone away, unfortunately. You know, injuries plague her. It's kind of similar story with Andreescu. But then it's also been like a mentality question mark, like strange coaching relationship with her dad. And just honestly, it didn't look like she has been having fun playing tennis for a while. I think the first time I seen her like look like she was having a good time was in San Diego last year, where she reached the final, I think. So I mean, again, it's like the game doesn't go anywhere. Like it's something with the mentality is off and the approach. I mean, maybe her body isn't the same as it was when she won the title, but it would be nice to see her reestablish herself, you know, inside these top rankings and be a contender again.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we talked about Karolina Pliskova, who played amazing this week in Brisbane. So if she plays like she did against Osaka, she might get to the final or win the tournament, but we'll see if she can maintain that level.
I don't think she's stringing back-to-back performances like that, but, you know.
And then on the ATP side, we also had Arthur Fils is a dangerous unseeded name. I mean, this guy is so talented and so fun to watch. I love watching Fils play. And then also Safiullin has been playing really strong tennis.
Really strong.
Yeah. And then Wawrinka and then Dominic Thiem, who also practiced together in Melbourne, by the way. Two of the players trying to come back and have a really strong season next year, but we'll see kind of what happens. And that's just some notable names who have been at the top of the game on Fils. Murray, we'll see what Andy can do, what Murray can do. And then also Draper, Shevchenko, Raonic is back. Matteo Berrettini is an interesting name. What do you think of Berrettini's chances for next, for his career this year and for like future years? What do you think is what do you imagine he could do, like his potential is at the moment? Do you think he's going to stay towards top of the game? On a best guess, it's very unpredictable at the moment.
Yeah, it's so hard to know because obviously he really couldn't do much last year physically. I mean, he made a decent go of it at Wimbledon. I mean, I think that's a surface that's always going to be favorable to him. I think the biggest issue with Berrettini is, you know, that he doesn't have a backhand. He can only really hit a slice backhand. And I think the best returners and the best movers in the world can exploit that if he's not, you know, playing a 100% level serving game, which obviously he can serve people off the court and he's got a ridiculous forehand. But I sort of worry with players like this who have this type of profile, who've now picked up a couple of these types of injuries, then got injured again at the US Open. It's almost like sometimes these injuries can become a little bit mental and happen because you are feeling a little nervous, feeling a little tentative. You haven't kind of built that, you know, match preparation and momentum, and you're like constantly just like trying to get back and trying to get, you know, reassert yourself, and the pressure starts to build and the question marks start to rise. And I think it's quite hard for me to predictably answer that question. I think he's the type of player that if he can be healthy for a season, I would certainly expect him to be inside the top 20, if not the top 15. But given the depth of the ATP field right now and kind of what other players with similar profiles are showing, like a Hurkacz, for example, in terms of a big serve, there's more to that game than what Berrettini has showed me in the past, I think. And so, you know, he's a name that I just have question marks over in terms of his ability to get back to the level that he once was, or even exceed it.
Right.
Yeah. But another name on that list that I think is exciting that I'm really keen to watch is Draper. He's a youngster, you know, from the UK that I've kind of had an eye on the last 18 months. And again, physical questions, you know, can he stay fit for a season has been the question mark with him. But in terms of talent and ability, I mean, he's so much fun to watch. He's got the weapons, big serve, big forehand, moves really well. Played a good first round match in Adelaide already this week. And again, he's that type of dark horse on a hard court that I wouldn't want to see on my half of the draw. And he's an exciting youngster, along with, you know, Feast, Shelton, and those guys who have big power games.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jack, if he's healthy, I think he's a top 30, top 20 guy. He could even climb up higher. He's very talented, big forehand, big game, very skilled. So I think once he gets more experience and kind of improves on the mental side of the tour, kind of like a guy like Sebastian Korda, as long as they're healthy, they should be climbing up a bit higher. So that's kind of what I would say about Jack as well. And then also just to touch upon the qualifying before we kind of get into like kind of overall thoughts and kind of power rankings. We had Diego Schwartzman.
Crazy to think he's all the way down there.
No, yeah. This is a guy who has a mentality that is top 10. This is a guy who has a talent that might be top 5, but he just can't figure it out at the moment. He's been on the tour for a long time, so it's a shame that he's playing qualifying, but I think everyone's rooting you on, Diego, so there you go.
Let's go.
Let's go, Diego. Goffin is also there, Dave Goffin. Cressy, Hugh Herbert, a French guy who has been as high as top 40 in the world. Some other players in there that I would mention as notable qualifiers. Alex Molchan is a talented guy. Also Lloyd Harris, Ivashka. Yeah, Benoit Perrin there. And then also a big name of Medvedev, who won the Next Gen Finals, and he's playing qualifying. We'll see how he can do kind of over there. And then WTA.
Oh, and don't forget Michael Moe. Michael Moe was a lucky loser at last year's Australian Open, and I think he made it to the 4th round.
Is that right?
Third round, fourth round. Yeah, he had a really good run here at the Australian Open last year. He sort of, everyone was like, "Who the hell is this?" So he came out of nowhere, and both on the WTA and the ATP side, we've got last year's junior champion playing, and that's I don't know how to pronounce his name. Blocks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with that, and it's
Blockx, if that helps. It's a very impossible name.
Yeah, and Korneva on the women's side. Other names for the WTA. Fruta Vitora, again, a youngster, 16 years old. And it's great to see, you know, junior champs now coming in and having their try at the pro level. I put the name Julia Niemeyer in the mix because some of you might not remember, but she made the quarters or the semis of Wimbledon in 2022. She, you know, I don't know what has happened to her. She's completely fallen off. But again, similar name, Teichmann hasn't had quite the same, you know, deep run as Niemeyer, but was a player that was solid, you know, top 40, top 30, and was in Grand Slam main draws and had a very poor season last year. So he's looking to turn that around. And then other names you might recognize are Yastremska, Harriet Dart, Volley-Nets, the American, who had a good go of things last year in Down Under, and Arunga, who had a good run in Guadalajara at last year's Masters tournament. So could be some fun qualifying matches in there. And of course, I think what's always fun to remind people with qualifying is like, these are the folks who have the most on the line. And, you know, it's a matter for them of, you know, making a significant paycheck at the start of the year and getting some ranking points that might help them get some sponsors or change the trajectory of their season, and putting them, you know, possibly in a tough situation where they're, you know, starting the year on a bad front. So I think qualifying, if you can watch it or you can go, is always interesting to keep an eye on. And of course, it's also a good opportunity to start to become familiar with some new talents, you know, younger talent that's given a go as well.
Only $10 to go in person, and
awesome.
You can watch for free if you can get some website. And it's almost impossible to find places to watch tennis nowadays, but if you can manage to do that, good job. But yeah, anyway, a lot of exciting names there, and I'm excited for this event. And then, do you want to go into kind of our power rankings for the Australian Open? Wrap it up with that.
Yes. One quick note for folks: this Australian Open will begin on a Sunday. That's unusual. Usually, slams begin on a Monday. So the Australian Open, I think, has, you know, tried to take on board some feedback in terms of challenges with late night finishes. A lot of conversation came up around that last year with Andy Murray finishing at 4 a.m. in back-to-back matches. I mean, you know, and it's not just the Australian Open that has this issue. It's all the slams. So they moved it to a Sunday, both to give kind of, you know, like families and kids another opportunity to come on a weekend and have some fun. And second, to try to see if it might combat some of these scheduling headaches. Well, we'll see. But yeah, if you're planning to watch, don't forget that it starts a day earlier than it has in the past. And if you're paying attention to things, the draw will come out this Thursday. So that'll give us some good insights and previews as to what early round matches you should be looking out for.
And then for the power rankings segment of the podcast, the power rankings, for anybody unfamiliar, these are kind of the players that we expect to do the best in the next kind of tournaments to come, who the players we feel like are doing the best at the moment. And this is kind of like our power rankings for the Australian Open and which players we expect to do the best at the Australian Open. So we actually have the same number one, which is, I suppose, makes a bit of sense with Rybakina's crazy week and also just Djokovic, how crazy he plays in Australia. But yeah, I have Djokovic and I have Rybakina, and we kind of talked a little bit about Rybakina earlier. She just is looking so good at the moment. And then kind of going down my kind of ATP list, I've got Jannik in there, I've got Daniil, I've got Alcaraz, kind of the best four players at the moment. Sinner ended the year really well last year. He hasn't played a lead-up event, but he's doing really well. And then number 5, I have Grigor Dimitrov, who, like I said, Australian Open has been his best event historically. This is a guy who's playing amazing. He's actually beating top guys at the moment. So I like how Dimitrov's playing. He's serving amazing. He's playing aggressive. I think he's a dark horse at the Australian Open. I just hope that mentally he performs, but he's been feeling confident and looking just calm out there. So I hope he can do that. And he's just so fun to watch. He's going to be playing, by the way, Dimitrov's going to be playing his 52nd consecutive Grand Slam tournament, which is a active record on the men's side. So watch out, Grigor. He's only, I believe, 33, 32, so he's got more time to go. And then for number 6, I have Zverev, who I see you have a lot higher on your list, Eliza, but we'll get to that. And then Rublev, then Hurkacz, then Rune. Then Tsitsipas. Nothing super crazy on my list. I was debating putting Tsitsipas higher, but he hasn't really shown me that much recently. Also, some injury concern, but he got to the Australian Open final last year. He's been consistent at this event. But yeah, that's kind of my ATP side. If you want to go over your kind of picks as well.
Yeah. So for me, Zverev takes that number 2 spot. Because I'm a little concerned by the fact that we haven't seen Medvedev, Sinner, or Alcaraz play any warm-up tournaments ahead of the Australian Open, and I feel like Australia is the one place where you probably do want to play a warm-up tournament because of the conditions and getting your body used to the heat, the humidity, and the way the court plays. And obviously, they all had good finishes to the season. They all finished the season pretty late as well. So, I understand it from a scheduling decision. I just always feel a little bit nervous, especially with Sinner and Alcaraz. They're young, they're not as experienced. Coming into a Grand Slam, having literally not played a match in a couple of weeks, I have question marks over it. I'm not going to lie. I just think that's a bit tough. So, Zverev having a good United Cup, getting used to the conditions, been down under for a little while. And he's playing some really good tennis and he looks physically really fit. And he's serving, he showed us last year that the kind of serving yips is a question mark we can put to one side, really. His sort of willingness to just mentally be tough. I think he's tougher in that way, in that department than he's been before. And I just think he's showing signs of somebody that's really knocking on the door. And I don't know, something tells me that he might have something more in the locker than the folks who haven't had the kind of warm-up tournaments. That's why I've pushed him up ahead of those guys for now. Rublev and Dimitrov to me are kind of very similar levels. I don't think there's that much between them in terms of, damage that they can cause, in terms of potential. I fancy both of them, to have a good run here and have a positive start to the season. I think, again, similar feelings about Rune and Hurkacz. I don't think there's that much between them. I think Rune has showed us that he's back from whatever slump that he was in. And I think it's also true that with back injuries in tennis, I always add 3 months on from what, somebody would normally say in terms of recovery time. Because I just think the back is such a difficult injury to pick up and to deal with and to kind of play through. And that's why, to me, I have a lot of question marks over Tsitsipas. He did pick up quite a nasty back injury with in the ATP finals, I mean, he was suffering from such a bad spasm he couldn't walk for a week, and having been someone that deals with that themselves, it takes a while to shake off a spasm like that. Even if there's structurally not something wrong, your muscles will start firing in a different way. That kinetic chain looks different than it was before, and kind of getting back to, you know, peak match level and peak fitness can be challenging. He's obviously had good runs at Australia before, made 2 finals, or at least 1 final in Australia, and so certainly shouldn't be a name that we discount. That to me is why I put Tsitsipas in here over someone like Taylor Fritz, who's, you know, in the top 10 in the live rankings. I just don't think he's shown the same level of promise in slam performances as Tsitsipas has, even though it might have been streaky. So we have all of the same names here in the mix, just slightly different thinking in terms of, you know, how they're coming into it. But
similar thinking about Steph though. I did think that this is a guy who's just his form and his health is kind of the questions for me, rather than his kind of his past success of the results. Also, I don't know if it's a tennis 360 thing, but I also have back issues. I was in months with physical therapy on my back, so I relate to that, and it sucks. Yeah. And it takes a long time. But yeah, it says boss, the back thing, that's a concern. Then also Sasha. So Sasha is interesting to me. We have different placements, which I like. I like it when there's a bit of a thing, and we can, because it makes something interesting, right? If we're all choosing the same things, nothing's that interesting. It's like people want to stray away from tennis debate and discussion, but it's good when people have differing opinions, as long as they're not eating each other alive, about it, which can be entertaining as well. But it's good to have tennis discussion. Sasha, for me, has just underperformed at Australian Open in the past for me. He's only reached 2 quarterfinals there. He's only reached 1 semifinal. He hasn't been to a final there. And there are multiple times I feel like he should have. He just has kind of underperformed, which part of the reason I put him. Also, he lost to Dimitrov this week. He got match points down against Hubie. He cut it really close. So I still have my questions about Sasha going into this year. Also, I'm not entirely convinced that he's at the consistency playing match in, match out that he was quite before the injury. He's real close. I'm just not sure the consistency is quite there, because he will play a match every now and again that feels a little bit more off. But I do agree that physically, since the injury, he's looking as good as ever. He's looking really fit. He did have a United Cup that'll give him a lot of confidence. For sure, it would give anybody a lot of confidence. So for me, I put Sasha a little bit lower, but I do have him at number 6. And I think he deserves a place in the United Cup power rankings in terms of what he'll do in at the Australian Open. And then I think our placements are really similar. Honestly, I have Dimitrov a little bit above Rublev, I will say, just because I feel like Rublev has a much tougher time beating top guys, whereas Dimitrov has beaten, I think, 4 or 5 top 10 guys in the last couple months. So that is one reason I put Dimitrov above. But anyway, very similar stuff. And then we can kind of wrap it up with the WTA power rankings.
Hang on, before we get on to WTA, I think there are a couple names that I want to mention that had deep runs in Australia last year. That includes Tommy Paul, Ben Shelton, and Seb Korda, 3 Americans. Obviously, Shelton had a fantastic run at the US Open, getting to the semifinal. I mean, Tommy Paul still had a strong season last year, was one of the best hard court players of the year. And Seb Korda, I mean, in Adelaide last year was very close to beating Djokovic, and really impressed at the Australian Open, and since picked up injuries and kind of not been in the mix. I think of those 3 names, Tommy Paul and Ben Shelton would be names to not be surprised if they are in conversation in the back half of the tournament, but also wouldn't be surprised if somebody like Ben can't back it up, given he's a rookie, he's in his second full year on tour, and he has a lot of points to defend. But again, those 2 players are well inside the top 15, and they both have a lot of points to defend, so that could make things interesting post Australian Open, how things are going to look in the rankings. So I just wanted to mention.
I think those are good 3 mentions. And I would say Korda, in my opinion, out of the 3 players, is the most complete of the 3 at the moment. So even though he's lacking form, he has one of the highest peaks. So if he just goes on a streaky event out of nowhere, we could find him in the back half of the tournament as well. So I like those mentions. And Korda was playing really well in Australia last year. Straight set at Medvedev, which is one of the strangest things that happened last year if you're looking at the context of the year as a whole, because Medvedev barely lost matches like that throughout 2023. But yeah, and then on the WTA side, I have Rybakina, then I have Swiatek, who is playing amazing. I think this is the first time she has ever won her first 4 matches in a season, ended the season amazingly with the WTA finals, Beijing. She's on a 16-match win streak. In fact, the only reason I have Rybakina is that she beat Swiatek last year 6-4, 6-4. She played as amazing as she did this year, and I really liked her in Australia. And then I have Sabalenka, who I just think is going to come in with a lot of pressure on her shoulders. She's never had to defend a major before, and Rybakina and Swiatek are just so tough at the moment. And Coco, very similar thing. I am actually very high on Coco going into this event. I'll be shocked if she doesn't make the quarterfinals or the semifinals. But it's just the thing of the 3 names above her are just so good and so good in Australia as well that I wanted to put her higher. I just couldn't really find the way in for her into those top 3. And then I have Chapeg, Jessica Pegula, and then I have Maria Sakkari, who I was actually looking really good this week at United Cup, which I was very pleased about. Greece, almost miraculously, even though Tsitsipas didn't play every match, won their group. So shout out to Maria Sakkari for holding Greece down. Then I have Azarenka, who performed very, very well this week. Like I said, a great win over Ostapenko. And then Svitolina, Ostapenko, and Zhang. And yeah, those are some names that I put in there. Svitolina, Ostapenko, and Zhang are just like names that aren't in the top 10, but they were performing really well this week. And then the top 7 are players that have been pretty consistent towards the top, and I don't see why they shouldn't be the top names. But yeah, you can kind of go over what do you have in the top 10 for your side?
Yeah, I mean, again, very similar names. I think the only places we're differing is I don't have Azarenka in my list. I mean, she's a former 2-time champion at the Australian Open, and such a good player. I love her. I would love for her to have a run. I think she hasn't won a title since 2016. So it's been a while, and I just don't think it's going to come here.
Yeah, the Sabalenka Swiatek switch as well. I noticed that.
Yes, so it's tough. Obviously, I never want to count out Swiatek. She's just such a fantastic player. I think the reason why I give a slight edge to Sabalenka is I think the conditions here are perfectly suited to her game. Hard courts, I think are her best surface, best opportunity. And I do think Sabalenka performs well when she has her back up against the wall. Like, that's something that really improved for her last year, and, had moments in that semifinal in the US Open where she lost the first set 6-love and managed to come back and win. Like, she's showed us moments where she's able to rally despite having a bad day or having a bad start. And I think she's got this really tough, dogged mentality. I don't think she's going to go away. Could she turn up and all of a sudden play a really bad match? Sure. But I think she's steadied that part of her game, and I think she's going to rise to this opportunity. She made a semifinal or better with every Grand Slam last year. Swiatek can't say that, and I favor her to do well. So that's why I swapped them. And I agree with you. I think it's hard to put Gauff higher than 4, despite the fact that she's the reigning Open champion. Again, like, I think it's one of those kind of matchups where if Rybakina and Sabalenka are playing their absolute best tennis, they should beat Coco Gauff on a fast playing hard court. But Gauff is such a good mover, such a good athlete. If they're even off their game by a couple percentage points, she puts herself in contention. And it's really rare that you see top players playing at lights out 100% at every match. So she's certainly a contender. I really don't think there's much that separates this top 4, which for the first time going into a slam on the WTA side, that we can really kind of be sure about who those big names are going to be and who we expect to get deep into the tournament. I agree with you. I think Jessica Pegula is kind of just outside of that. I mean, the reason why she sits there is because she's not, really gotten past around a 16 in a Grand Slam. So hopefully this year is the year that she gets over the line. Sakkari had some great performances for Team Greece, had a better end to her season last year. So I had Svitolina over her because obviously she made the final in Auckland, and I think she played some really impressive tennis and is showing levels again of a top 10 player. Similar with Ostapenko, again, strong performances in Brisbane and made the quarterfinals here last year, and certainly has a game to challenge anybody. Had a good season last year. Zhang makes it inside my top 10 because I think, she's got all the makings of a player who can make it big time in the tennis world. She's working with Coco Gauff's former coach now that she lost Wim Fissett to Naomi Osaka. Speaking of which, I put her in my top 10. And I gave her the nod because she just looked so good coming back already. And she's a former champion here, 2-time champion here. And her racket head speed, her serve can just really cause anybody problems. And whoever's quarter of the draw she ends up on is going to be annoyed. So I don't know. I have a sneaky feeling that she could impress at this tournament. So that's why I gave her the nod.
Yeah. I'd love to see it, to be honest, for Osaka, and she is a 2-time champion here, which always means something. It was just slightly more Azarenka to me, who got to the semifinals last year and also had a good kind of performance against Elena Rybakina in the first set tiebreaker. But Osaka is interesting because I reckon she might just need a little bit more time, but I absolutely consider that she's gonna. I would be surprised if she doesn't reach another major final in her career and probably win another one or maybe multiple. We have to wait to see how her career trajectory goes, but I don't see why she can't get back to the top and be extremely successful. I just think she might need more time. And part of the reason is even when she was playing about a year and a half, 2 years ago, she was still having some issues. And part of the issue is the mental game, and we're still yet to see how that kind of goes because even in her first few matches back, she wasn't playing the big points great. I think she converted maybe 2 of 11 break points against Pliskova, I remember as a stat. So the big points still aren't great for her in the mental side. It reminds me a bit of Raducanu as well because they have everything else going for her. Their upside and talent is so big. Their ball striking is so huge. But I just think that the mental side is going to be the really big thing to gauge with both of them. And if they can get it together, then watch out because they're 2 major champions that are going to be big to watch out for. And Osaka, especially because she is a 4-time major champion and she just plays with such a top tier. But yeah, we have a very interesting, similar one. I do think the women's tournament is going to be especially interesting. Going into Australia, you just feel like Djokovic is the big question mark on the men's side because he is just an unstoppable force, it feels like, at this event. We'll see how the other guys challenge him. On the women's side, it's open game. So we'll see who's able to get it. We both kind of liken to Rybakina at the top, partially because for Brisbane performances, but it's pretty open, I think.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's a reason why we love the WTA, and it's great to be talking about it in the sense of there are 4 names here that really could win it because they're deserving of that accolade. Like their performances have been so good. I think in the past there's been like 1 or 2 names that are like, hey, this person should win it, and then it's open season as to who might have a good week. And of course it's still, you could have random names popping up. We've got comebacks of major champions, and you have stories like Vondrousova and people like that who randomly turn up. Interestingly, neither of us have Jabora in our list, who's, the 3-time major finalist. Question marks over her fitness at the moment. But, I think it's been a long time since we've been able to say, like, there are 4 names in here who are all recent Grand Slam champions, who are top 4 in the rankings themselves, like, who have all shown good performances at the start of this year. Like, all of them look good, healthy, fit, strong, ready to go. And it's been a while since we've had that, so I'm super stoked. It's a great opportunity for the WTA to show their stuff, and I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a fantastic start to the year. Australian Open is going to dish up some interesting things, and the men's side, Djokovic is going for title number 11. It's an absurd number. It's the same storyline as last year. Is he fully healthy? And then, we have the same conversations of, you just don't count him out. You don't bet against this guy. He's got a 96% win rate at the Australian Open. I mean, it's absurd. And if you're intelligent and you bet on anything, then you wouldn't bet against him. But secretly, I'm sure there are a number of us who think, oh gosh, could we please have somebody else? Unless you're a huge Novak fan. So, let's see how it goes. But he's certainly going to win another slam this year. If it's not this one, I am pretty sure it will be this one. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I fully agree. All right, that's going to be it from Tennis 360 podcast this week. I've been Anthony Hirsch.
I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
And I appreciate you guys checking out the podcast. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to Quality Shot Tennis like always. And I'll see you guys at the next one.
Bye.